Okay, it's official. We're on the podcast now.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, absolutely. So, I think I don't know. We've never met. I've read some of your book. I read actually your book, The Queen of the Warrior Bees, right?
I liked your review very much. I thought it showed understanding of a lot that I was hoping readers would pick up on.
I love the book, actually. So let me just introduce this for people who are going to be watching this in the future, because we will post this to our podcast page, and also we'll put it on your author page, the one that we created at International Writers Inspiring Change, so people can see it there too. We're speaking with Jean Gill. Is it correct to say that you're a Welsh author?
It is, but Wales is my adopted country. It's complicated, so that's something I can explain later.
Okay, great. And we're talking to you from France. Where in France are you?
In the south, in Provence, near Montélimar.
Sounds nice. Sounds warm.
It's beautiful. Lavender fields, olive trees, and very warm. Too warm in the summer.
Okay. Well, great. Well, we're broadcasting from Sweden. That's where we're located. Not so warm here, but getting there.
I saw that you two had relocated from somewhere a lot further away from Europe.
Yes,
interesting.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'm originally from Canada. I'm an author too, obviously. So, but I'm originally from Canada, and then relocated to the States, and I was there for 30 plus years, and then married a Swedish woman, and here I am.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So, yeah, as you know, my name is Ray Alaplane. So I do reviews for International Writers Inspiring Change, and then I'm also hosting a podcast. So there are the introductions. So, Jean, yeah, we're interested in your story. Tell us about the background and, like you said, Wales versus where you are now.
I had a nomadic childhood because my father was a soldier. So we never stayed in one place more than 2.5 years was the longest. So I had no roots whatsoever, although my parents were Scottish, and for them being Scottish was mobile. They considered us all Scottish wherever we lived. But when I was 21, I moved to Wales and stayed there the longest I've stayed anywhere in my life. And so I adopted Wales as my country because I felt a sense of belonging there, and I loved it very much.
Your accent, would it be Scottish or Welsh?
No, I was born in Aldershot in England, but I only lived there for 6 months. And when I say we moved around the world, I lived in Berlin, I lived in Hong Kong, and mostly among army families. But it meant that my accent changed every time I moved, and I tried to fit in, but I never did. And then I've got a little bit of a Welsh accent, a little bit of a Yorkshire accent, a little bit of, unfortunately, not a very good French one, but I do speak French.
It's good. So you're really a citizen of the world. It comes
very much so. And that's why I like the premise of your site. The whole idea of international writers is very dear to my heart. I am not happy with borders and crossing those borders is important to me.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think especially in today's world, we need to have not this divisional attitude and segregation that we see sort of being popularized again. It needs to be about everybody.
Yeah, and that sense of division is part of what inspired Queen of the Warrior Bees. The particular division in that book is nature versus humanity, as if there's some kind of division there, as if people aren't part of nature. But there are other divides as well. And increasingly, I'm seeing with events at the moment that some of the events in my book have become even more relevant currently than I expected them to be.
I agree. Especially, I mean, looking back at, because I remember the book very well. And comparing it to current events, what's happening now in the world, I think it has really a great relevance and a strong message. So that's very good. The the next question I have for you is that sort of sums up you, but I was interested when I read your bio. You mentioned that you were the first secondary teacher in Wales.
I was the first woman to be a secondary comprehensive school head teacher in the county of Dyfed in Wales. And at the time, there were 38 head teachers, and I was the only woman. And another woman was appointed at much the same time. And then the county split up, so I was still the only woman actually attending the meetings. And the funny thing is, I'm very small. So it didn't feel so much of a gender divide as a height divide, because everyone literally talked over my head. And there was a kind of in joke that one of the things you needed to be a head teacher, and it's a tough job, you've got to be a tough guy. So you needed to be tall. And there weren't many head teachers who were under 6 foot, that was for sure. It was interesting time. But yeah.
Fascinating. So you're really a trailblazer also just for the gender. I mean, you were first in your.
I I felt very, very proud of actually winning that role, because the odds were against. But the advantage when you know that the odds are against is that you can't really lose, because you've got lots of excuses for not getting there. And so I
Right.
always tried to take that positively and think, look, if I don't make it, if I don't get this job or the next job or whatever, then the odds are always against me. Um,
Mm,
and it's not my fault. Just keep going, because somebody's got to be the first to do something.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I remember when I got the job, it was in what used to be an all boys school. Back in the day, it was an all boys grammar school in Llanelli, and it was very well known for some very successful men in positions of power who went to that school. So I inherited a really, really male school, which now had boys and girls, and was going to close. There were all kinds of political problems. And I
Mm,
remember one of the boys saying to me, "Where do you go to the toilet?" Now, this is interesting, because there'd always been a headmaster, and he had his own toilet, and on the door it said headmaster's toilet. So it was funny, given all these questions nowadays about gender and toilets and what have you. And I said, hey, it really doesn't matter where people go to the toilet. We all do it. But it was a perception that it was the headmaster, very much so.
interesting. Very much a patriarchal society culture.
Within the school, yes. And one of the events that I went to at that time, I was because I was head teacher, I was president of the Old Boys Association. So it meant that I was there in a hall full of men, some of them very old men. Um, and we had
Were you the
to,
only woman there? Or
I don't remember any other women being there.
okay.
I really don't, because it was the Old Boys Association. My deputy was there. He was a man. My governors, some of them were there, and two of them had been head teachers. They were men. So I think I was the only woman there, but I'm apologizing if there was someone else. I don't think so.
Was it intimidating for you?
It was surreal. And I was more,
Imagine.
I was more frightened of getting the ceremony wrong than about being a woman, because I'd never been part of that sort of club where you have to raise your glass and make a toast to the class of, oh my goodness, it was the class of 1950, or it really went far back. And then they would all reminisce, and I had to make a speech and do all the formal things. And I've got a photo of me actually at that time, and it's just so funny when I look back. But my day-to-day job was working with youngsters, and
Right.
that's what I'd spent my career doing, and that's what it was all about.
It's an interesting thing I noted when you were describing that whole, how you got elevated into that position. And I look back at the Queen of the Warrior Bees and the main character. I don't remember her name offhand.
Mielita.
Yeah. Is there any relationship between, because she is obviously living in a very patriarchal society
Yeah.
too, in a very divisional situation where, you know, you were either this class or that class. Does she sort of represent a little, or was she inspired a bit by your own experience?
I certainly had enough of that experience to write it in. And I quite often write about misfits because I always was a misfit. And I think it's good for a writer to be an outsider. You have all kinds of perspective on things. So even though I hated it as a child, it's been very useful for me to always be slightly outside, never fitting in. And now I'm quite proud of it. I like not fitting in. And some of that I definitely wrote into the story. There's characters, not just Mielita, but Driana, who goes through the terrible experience of being objectified as a girl, of being
That's
forced
right.
married as a girl. And there's one line in the book where the powerful and corrupt mage suggests that she'd be a better wife if they muted her. And that line definitely came from experiences of people wanting me to shut up, definitely. And not in the same evil or deep way, but the feeling that it would be nice if Jean stopped talking was definitely part of it. And it probably would have been, if I'm honest. I probably do talk too much. But the muting of Driana and then her rebellion struck me as something quite profound that I related to very much. And Mielita herself, obviously, is a heroine who her connection with the bees drew from my experience as a beekeeper, and that was an opportunity to go in my imagination where I couldn't go in real life.
Do you actually professionally do beekeeping, or is it a hobby, or?
It was a hobby. I've stopped now because I lost my last beehive, and it's so important to keep bees for the environment. We know all this, but it's actually become even more difficult to do so. And if you care about your bees, then the heartache of losing colonies to the the problems of climate change, of pollution, of insecticides, of new and very nasty diseases which are traveling the world quickly, and of course predators as well. I found that heartbreaking. And when I lost the last hive, I decided that I had to leave it for now, but I miss them. And I did a 2-year course in Provence. So I learnt about beekeeping on a practical course over 2 years, and doing it in French and never having worked with bees was something
That's a challenge.
it was a real challenge, very
When
much
you say
so.
you lost the hive, I mean, was that due to climate change or disease, or was it?
Well, I only wanted to keep 2 or 3 hives as an ideal. But what happens is that the nature of beekeeping and bee lives is that sometimes a hive will swarm and you'll lose it. Sometimes you get problems with the hive. And so you can never say you'll always have 3 hives. You have to combine them, change them, um, make decisions about those hives. And when you find an empty hive or when your bees die, you have to conduct an autopsy. So you have to actually decide how they died. So you know whether you've got any diseases that you should report, or that, well, what did you do wrong? The tendency to blame yourself is there for all of us, even though you can't play God to that degree. And with this, the last hive, they'd lost their queen during the winter. And in retrospect, I think that I'd bought a new hive, and I don't think I was sold a young enough queen, which I should have been, to survive.
It's fascinating, and that the whole field is fascinating.
Oh, it's
Works.
amazing. Yeah.
That hive that you lost, the last one, was that the one you called Endeavor?
No, it was diligence that I lost. So I had
Okay.
when I had all three hives, I had endeavor, diligence, and resolution. My husband named them, and someone said it sounds like space mission. And yeah, it's a bit like that.
Fascinating. Okay, okay, I'm just going to make another comment here, and I do tend to segue, so
That's fine.
because I always pick up on these things, like the main character from, again, I found your main character in Queen of the Warbees inspiring as a character because she was a fighter,
I'm
and
glad.
she never
Yeah.
quit. She just kept going for whatever the goal she had in mind, and she didn't compromise. I almost feel like she is sort of also the queen of women's rights. There's a little bit of a double uh, persona there, that she's fighting
Yeah,
for women as much as she's fighting for nature.
I like that idea, but I think that role grows during the three books, because at the beginning, she just wants to fit in.
Mm,
She's a foundling who was born in a really strange way because she just appeared through the walls. She's got a blacksmith who's an adoptive father who doesn't see her as being worthy of taking over and working in the smithy, and yet she's so good at it. She doesn't fit, she's not respected, she's got nothing, and each set of friends goes through the maturity test, this horrible, horrible maturity test that she wants to do, and afterwards they've forgotten her. So she's a loner at the beginning. She's got no friends,
right.
she's bullied, she has no concept of fighting, because how do you fight the whole of society? And society is perfect. So obviously she isn't. And
Right.
then, of course, we have the
It's always
epiphany.
it's always the institution, the individual against the institution, and the
Yeah,
institution is always considered right, so you have to be wrong.
yeah, exactly that. And in some ways, what they've created within this world, the Citadel, it is perfect. They don't have the problems that we have in our world today,
Mm.
and yet it's not acceptable.
And I guess it really comes down to the definition of perfection. You know,
Yeah,
somebody's interpretation of perfection is not the same as others.
I think perfection and the notion of it is very dangerous.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what I loved about the natural world, which is of course the enemy as far as the Citadel is concerned, when Miolita discovers it, she realized the variety in the natural world, the beauty, the variety, the chaos, yes, the cruelty as well. But that different perspective is so important for people.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Anyhow, that was that question. All right, just back to the starting point. What got you started writing? How did you get started? What,
I,
what, what
I've
was the
always
catalyst?
I've always written, so I don't know if you can see this, but I peaked at 11. So this is my novel, 12 chapters that I wrote. Can I don't know if
Yeah.
that
Okay. Oh,
shows.
is it called Jill's
Jill's
Stable?
Stables. There we are. That's better.
Yep.
And I was Jean Taylor then, and it's got 12 chapters and illustrations. And I was pretty good at school. And I used to finish ahead of the other children. So my lovely teacher, when I was 11, let me write my novel when the other children were finishing their work. So I actually wrote that in school. And I had my first review ever from the teacher at the end of it, who said you could have done more pictures. So that wasn't really helpful. But I know I loved writing stories when I was a child. I really did. And then university stopped all that because university was the study of great white men, and there was no place for my writing in it at all in those days.
Right.
But I came back to it.
And obviously you got back to writing again.
Yeah, I've published, I think, 27 books now. And
Impressive.
the first one was published in 1988, which was poetry. And then when I was 40, I had an idea for a novel and wrote my first novel when I was 40.
No, it's an impressive number of prolific author would be
It
a
feels good.
terrible.
It
Yeah,
feels
you've
good.
done great stuff. Would you, looking back on it, was there any particular person or author that inspired you or kind of fueled your writing?
Yeah,
Or-
definitely. I mean, when I was a child, I read the popular children's books like Enid Blyton. I just read everything, and particularly if it had dogs in it. But when I was about 17, 18, I was reading some quite heavy stuff, and I discovered Colette, and I loved her work. It was so sensuous. And since then, I've read it in French, which is lovely to be able to read in the original. And she still inspires me even now.
Mm,
And the famous not writing at university, just feeling that people like me didn't write. It's not, what ordinary people like me do,
yeah,
was cured by reading Stevie Smith's poetry, because that was just so different from the the heavy literary works I'd been reading for so many years. And a lot of people know her poem Not Waving but Drowning, but all of her poetry has something quirky, something real, something direct. It's not trying to be clever, it's trying to connect. And I think
right.
that made a difference. But there were so many writers after that. I've just read and read and read.
That's great. That's great. You made a little statement there, which blipped on my meter here. Dogs. What is it about dogs?
Yeah, when it's childhood again. When I was a little girl, I used to knit squares for dog blankets for dogs, and all I wanted in life was a dog. That was quite straightforward because I was very lonely, I think, as a little girl,
Mm,
and I just wanted a dog. And moving around all the time, we couldn't have a dog. My parents would never have allowed a dog. And there was this hole in my heart until the first dog arrived. And I've loved 13 dogs in my life so far. Each one of them has brought something special. And I've worked with two top dog trainers now because I've found one who lives near me here who is wonderful. And with her, I've been doing classes on tracking so that my pointer has learned how to take a scent and track it to find the person it belongs to, and just for fun. But it's been really good for both of us to do that.
wow.
And one of my books was from the point of view of a Pyrenean mountain dog because that's been my favorite breed over the years, and
Wow.
that's had a lot of success. And actually, that's what made me think that I could do Queen of the Warrior Bees, because the main character has a terrible accident in the forest where she's stung by thousands of bees, and it transforms her and it turns her into a bee shifter, for the sake of using the term.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can write from the point of view of a bee because I've written from the point of view of a dog, and I'm a beekeeper. And yeah, I read so much research about bees. I know how they see, how they hear. I even know a little bit about what they think, or at least how they manifest that. So why not? So
That's a great
That
perspective.
went from dogs to bees.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. You mentioned, I realized, as I was listening to you, you moved around a lot from base
Yeah,
to base from a military perspective,
yeah.
and you said you were lonely. Was it difficult to make friends or enduring friends as you were moving around,
It was
or
impossible.
relationships?
And I had very close friends. And of course, either the close friend would move because they were army families too, or
Mm,
I would move. Um, I used to write to them for a little bit afterwards, and then it would tail off. So
yeah.
it was heart-wrenching. It was heart-wrenching. And my son has had the opposite, where he was born and grew up in the same part of Wales, and he's now 40 and has the same friends he went to school with. And yeah, that's nice. But
Wow.
I've managed to make friends in my 20s that I'm still friends with now. And the internet has made that easier. But it was heart-wrenching. It really was.
But do you find that, would you say that writing and that whole creativity, that universe that we go into as authors, sort of substituted for that loneliness? Or was it just not related?
Not related with me, I don't think.
Okay,
Not related.
yeah, that's fair.
I think
Good.
the reading rather than the writing. I used to read books
Mm,
because although I was writing, I didn't write as much as I read. I just ate books. So libraries were my friend, books were my friends.
I can see that behind you.
Yes.
That's great. Um, is there a message? I mean, you've got several series, which we're just going to touch on. You know, you've got the Natural Forces series, you've got the
Yeah.
Troubadour series, you've got the Midwinter Dragon series. Do each of these series have a separate message to them, or is there a sort of a general message or theme or weave that you try to communicate in your books?
It's the people and the story which are the spark each time. I start with a vision in the Troubadours. I could see a female troubadour in a ditch with a Pyrenean mountain dog because I read an actual history book saying there were women troubadours. And rumor says that one of them was touring the south of France with a big white dog. Now, how could
Mm,
I not write that book? So it
that's
starts with the
interesting.
people. It starts with the people always. And with the Viking series, I was in the prehistoric tomb in Maeshowe and surrounded by 12th century graffiti. And I could just see the people and I had to write their story. So the stories grab me.
Is
And
that the Midwinter Dragon series? Is that the
it
one?
is, yes. So the stories grab me. But within those stories, I'm aware now that there are certain characteristics of Jean Gill and how she writes. And I didn't realize when I started, I thought I was writing a women's fiction or romantic novels with the first one, but it turns out that what I write is adventure. I love adventures and they're historical adventures, but the research is very deep and the romance is very light. So if people are looking for romance, they don't really want my books because they're more suspense and adventure and historical background. And
Understand.
within the Warrior Bees, um, I was very angry when I wrote it. So there were two things. The story came because friends, I did get stung by many bees. I behaved stupidly. I was overconfident and I got stung on the head by about 50 bees of my own bees. And
50 bees stung
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Ah,
And I was in shock, quite literally, physically. And my husband took me to the chemist who sent me straight to the doctor and I had one of the whatever they call it, injections um, against the shock. And I'm not allergic to bees, but it was the sheer volume of venom that sent me into shock. And I was really annoyed with myself because what happened was that one of the frames in the hive didn't fit very well. So I was banging the hive to get it back in, which I had to do because the weather wasn't very good and I had to put the hive safely back together. And the girls, because most of the bees are girls, became very, very stressed and they had enough with the bad weather coming. I realized they were stressed. I had my outfit on, so I walked away, and then I thought I had a bee inside my face mask. So I just lifted it to get rid of the one bee, and they'd followed me. They were so angry they'd followed me, and
So they followed you and then they attacked at that
yeah,
point.
yeah.
Oh my God.
So it was very scary, but I thought about it a lot. And I went back to work with the bees. And I had to go back straight away. So I'd been stung and I went back up and I slammed the frame back in place and I put the roof on and I made sure they were safe. Then I went into the house and had a shower because I needed to think about it. And I was picking out these little bee stings from my head, thinking, this,
Are they like
this isn't
little
good.
stingers that are?
Yeah, yeah, little black darts. And I'd only been stung once or twice before that. And I thought, this isn't good. This isn't good. I can't hide it. I've got to tell my husband that I've been stupid, that I've been stung by a lot of bees. And of course, then I started going into shock. And the nice,
Is the shock, I'm sorry, is the shock caused by venom or is it
yeah,
just the, it
yeah,
is venom? Okay.
yeah. And the injection worked. And the funny thing is, you might have read that bee venom sometimes gets used for arthritis treatment. And
I wasn't aware of that, no.
yeah, it's a traditional recipe for arthritis treatment. And of course, I'd had a lot of this stuff and I'd had the antidote, whatever it's called. And for a month after that, all the usual aches and pains had gone completely. I don't recommend it, by the way. I really don't
Okay.
recommend it, but I felt great. So I told a friend this story and she said, "Oh, wouldn't it make a great story where someone was stung by a lot of bees and they had superpowers?"
We'll get the
And I thought,
Spider-Man concept.
yeah, and this sort of turned in my head for a while and I thought about it and I thought maybe I'll write that sometime, but I was doing the last of the Troubadours books. And then I got angry with something, really angry. There was a conversation on Facebook where somebody said, "Do you think I should get fake grass?" And I live in a little village in the wilderness, so I didn't know that this had become a thing and that people who live in towns and cities and who are fed up of mowing the lawn or looking after their gardens were putting fake grass down. And so I read this with naivety and shock. And somebody said, "Yeah, it's so clean, and you just need to run the vacuum cleaner over it, and it'll stay clean." And I thought, but we're killing all the life that lives in the
In the
cracks
grass.
in the cracks
Yeah.
in our paving, in the grass, in everything around us, in our little houses and gardens. We live with other creatures. And so that combination sparked me off on what if? What if human beings, and I see it all around me now, took this urban hatred of nature to the extreme to create the citadel, an ideal, perfect society in the eyes of
Mm.
those who've come up with this idea, where nature is shut out. And this division between humanity and nature becomes physical, that we're scared of it, we don't go near it, we kill it off and put the two things
Well,
together.
no, that's great because that's a clear concept of what sparked this book.
Yeah,
And clearly, when you read the book, you really do get that dynamic, that feeling of like the hatred that the Citadel has for nature. I mean,
Yeah.
it's brutal, it's visceral, and yet on the other side of it, nature is wonderful. It's not even a threat.
Yeah. And every time I see on the news that people are trying to keep birds off trees or whatever insanity they're doing now, I just think, hey, people, we're nature. We've got to share our environment with all these other creatures. So yeah, I get
I
angry.
think that's a good point. I mean, it's true, and it was another thing that I really liked about the book, because I too have this sense of like, we've been urbanized, for so many decades now, that we've forgotten that nature is important, and the fact that entire species are disappearing every day on
Yeah.
Earth. And it's just normalized, and it's like, well, it doesn't affect me, so nobody gives, a damn
Yeah.
about that. But it is important that we're killing off species. And now we want to hoover our grass.
Yeah, exactly. But once I started writing, then it was the people who brought it to life. I wanted my readers to find in it what they find in it, and people find different things. I
Yes.
really don't want it to be, this book has a message. The messages are there, sure, but they come through what I hope is a story that makes you think, oh, I hope she's going to come through it. What's she going to do next? And there are a lot of different threads through it that people will follow with their own way of seeing things, I think. I
Yeah.
hope.
That's good. And how they interpret it and relate to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
character. These are great information, great insights. So I could go on, but we try to keep these about 25 minutes
Sure.
long. Um,
Can I just
I think,
mention that I'm wearing a special necklace with a bee on it, made by one of my readers who is a jeweler, and she was inspired by Queen of the Warrior books. She reads my books, she writes to me, some fan mail, and Pam Grant wrote to me and said, I've created a necklace based on how I felt about your book. And of course, when I saw it, well, here it is. I had to have
that's
it.
great.
So
Does she
magic,
sell more of them, or was it just a one-up?
a one-off. She creates all kinds of interesting jewelry and
Ah,
whatever inspires her. And I'm sure people who wanted one like it would be able to write to her and ask, say, can you do another one like Jean has? But it's an example of the way magic happens, and
ah.
just when you don't expect anything to come to you, or you've read something about numbers and people who sell more books, it's something like that that makes you think, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, the whole concept between international writers inspiring change is, some people ask us, well, why is it international writers inspiring change? What does that mean, inspiring change? Well, our concept, and certainly my concept as one of the founding members of the whole platform, is that, and as a writer, I feel that authors plant seeds that inspire. They're timeless. And like you said, the Queen of the Warrior Bees inspires people in different ways. There's no one singular message, People get
Mm.
different things from it. But I feel that books, looking back when I was young and like you, reading books by authors at that time, and even classic novels, they never left me. They started
Yeah,
as 30 years later, I was thinking about that book. And I think that books do inspire people and they plant seeds, and you never know when those seeds are going to pop, but they do pop.
I would love to think that even one of my books will stay in someone's mind that long. That would be lovely.
Well, I think we'll never know, obviously,
No.
but I think it's impossible. But yeah, I think they do. They have a domino effect. They echo.
Mm.
The words just, yeah, they just keep traveling. I mean, we're still talking about Homer 2,500 years later, and
Yeah.
Shakespeare, and I mean, they're timeless. They're timeless. Let me ask you one other question before we ask the final question. I usually I like to ask this question to people, like especially people like yourself who've been a teacher and been in the educational system. Comparing the current culture and your dealings with it, how do you see literacy and reading today compared to, let's say, 30, 40 years ago? Are we having a decline in it? Or uh, is digital or social media replacing reading? Or how do you see this? Is it,
I'm not in schools anymore, so I don't have the same breadth of experience. And I was
mm,
working with a lot of youngsters whose literacy was very poor.
mm,
Um,
back
so
then?
back then,
Yeah.
so I wasn't working with the sort. To give you an example, I was English advisor for Neath Port Talbot for 86 schools for 4 to 19-year-olds, and there isn't one bookshop in the county. Not one.
Wow.
There were libraries. There was
No
a
bookshops.
news agents with some books in, but amongst 86 schools in one county, not one bookshop. So that gives you an idea that literacy, as I worked with it, was not good
Mm,
generally. There were, however, if you like, the youngsters who did very well in school were more likely to read books, I think, than those now. And
right.
I think the notion of literacy has changed because youngsters can't learn all the skills of reading a book and finding their way around books if they're spending so much time on computers, because you find your way around in a different way. So they have all kinds of skills that we didn't,
Right.
but they don't have the skills we did. And I think the biggest worry I have in terms of literature is that language has changed so much that it's not now possible to work with even very academic students and them to be able to understand the language of 17th century literature.
Mm.
Whereas we still had enough of that old vocabulary from what was around us at the time that we could reach out to the past. So I think we're losing touch with the past.
Yeah,
And to me, that's important with my tendency to live in the 12th century. I find the past a place that we can learn a lot from, and it's fascinating.
I agree with you. I agree. That's a good answer. Thank you. Thank you. Well, okay, then here's our final question. What advice would you give to, because we get a lot of novice authors that come to
Yeah.
IWIC, and people who are listening, and we had an author who wrote into us and who had actually watched one of the podcasts, and I think it was a she, had lost touch with writing, sort of like, gave up.
Mm.
But after watching the podcast and listening to an author, she got re-inspired and got jumped back into the boat. What advice would you give to authors, writers coming up?
The advice that was given to me that stuck with me was don't get it right, get it written. So I
Mm,
always, for a first draft, I don't edit, I don't criticize myself, I don't second guess myself. When I'm ready to write, I dive in. And a lot of writers say they get in the zone and lose themselves in the writing. I do. I enjoy it. I get it all written.
right.
Then it's the time to actually make it good.
Yeah.
So that's still my main piece of advice. But the other thing that's always worked for me is that when I am writing, suppose I'm writing a novel, you're looking at something very big.
Mm,
100,000 words is a mountain of words.
mm.
And I've never had writer's block because the way I write is to stop when I know what I'm going to write the next time I sit down to write. So I don't write it all out in one go. If I've got a scene in my head, I stop before the end of the scene. I make sure that I'm raring to go the next time I sit down.
Well, so you leave a little bit there just to kickstart again.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So that you're not
Interesting.
sitting down and thinking, what now? That you've actually got ready to go what
Wow.
comes next.
Wow.
And if it means writing less in one go, write less in one go. Who says you can't, you've got to write X number of words? Who says there's rules about it?
Yeah. Yeah, don't empty the tank. Keep it a
Yeah.
little bit full.
Yeah.
That's great advice. I like that.
I
That's
like the
really
way you
good.
expressed it. I shall use that next time. Don't empty the tank. Yeah.
That's great. That's a great answer, Jean. Well, listen, it's been great having you on the podcast. And what we're going to do is we're going to post it on our podcast page at iWick. Uh,
Thank
it'll
you.
also it'll also appear in your because we did a feature article about you some
Yeah.
years ago. So
Yeah.
we'll put it in there too, because then people visiting your page can actually see everything. You can watch the
Yeah.
podcast there as well. And
And
we'll
just,
also
if I can just let readers know that there's a link, which I think is going on the page as well, to
yes.
a fantasy sampler. I was invited to join the company of adventurers, which sounds great at my age. And four of us have put together a sampler, which is free to download and which has got chapters and fun facts from four of our books, including Queen of the Warrior Bees.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that iWick, the people at iWick have actually added that link to your
I
author
think
page.
so. Excellent.
So I think it's there now. But what we can do too is we'll send you a link after the podcast is posted to the page where you can actually download the video yourself. And then if you want to post it around on your site or send it to people, you'll have the podcast video there.
I will definitely do that. It's been lovely to actually meet you properly, and
Yeah,
thank you for all the work you're doing. It's really appreciated.
it's a great pleasure working with authors like you, and I get inspired by it. And I'm I guess I should read the next book. I think I've only read the one book, The Queen of the Warrior Bees. So
Oh yeah, you have to find out what happens next. But and you've got another 26 Jean Gill books to go after that, so you know.
excellent. Yeah, no lack there. So I'll dig into
No
one of
lack.
those. Jean, thank you very much,
Thank
and
you.
enjoy the weather down in the south of France.
It's lovely at the moment. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.